want to be thankful for his help, for his great mercy, and as Gary prayed, that we would hear and that he would guide our steps, because he does that, you know.
True.
And that's was his plan all along, by God's grace. And as I was trusting to share this past week, and even a little bit the week before, trusting to know where to go, and I like to stick with the lectionary if I can, because that's what Pastor likes to do, and I tried to do that, but and there's some ways I could cross-reference that, and it applies, but I believe he has led for me to go back and to review just a point that I made the last time that I spoke, by God's grace. And so I've entitled this, "And They Settled There," or "How to Get to Christmas in August." No, figure that out. If I could, this morning, this is the point where we would have the Scott Depot Choir sing. And I would want to go back about 34 years to a song that they would sing, and you're going to remember this. I'm going to read you the words. But Becky Bowers would have the solo part in this song. And how in the world Sally knew to choose Becky for this was a wonderful, wonderful thing, because I remember Becky's voice being one of such innocence, such purity. And we all remember, those of you that know her, we all remember how shy and timid and backward she was, just probably about as much as anybody you'd ever meet. And then all of a sudden, one time, she stood up in service and she testified. And she shared how God had been talking to her that she would need to testify more, and that it had to do with her denying herself and God getting her to where he wanted her to be and how to speak. And Pastor had encouraged her along the way during this time, and she heard the message to be able to share. And so that was an aspect of her personality that God helped her with wonderfully, and because she had such great treasures hidden within her. And those of you that remember the number I'm about to read will remember how sweet it was when she would sing. But he took me there this week, and I don't know how many times I've listened to this week, but it has to do with where he's going to take us here this morning, by God's grace. Choir number was titled, "You Are There, My Lord." Long before I was born, you were there. When my body was formed, you were there. Lord, you planned for me and cared for me within my mother's womb. You were there, my Lord. You were there. You've searched me, Lord, and you have known me, Lord. There's not a thought I think, but that you know it too. You are behind me, Lord. You are before me, Lord. I cannot understand, but this one thing I know. You are there, my Lord. You are there, my Lord. You are there, my Lord. You are there. In the dark of the night, you are there. In the day's golden light, you are there. There's no darkness that can hide me, for the dark is light to you. You are there, my Lord, you are there. You know me, Lord. You understand me, Lord. There's not a word I speak, but that you know it too. I cannot hide from you no matter what I do, no matter how I go, or when I go, or where. You are there, my Lord. you are there, my Lord. You are there, my Lord, you are there. Though I rise up to heaven, you are there. In the valley of death, you are there. Though I fly with wings of morning to the islands of the sea, you are there, my Lord. Anywhere, my Lord. Everywhere, my Lord. You are there, my Lord. You are there. What does God know about each one of us? Look around the room. And you could look around any room anywhere in the world, and everyone you're looking at would be a unique creation of God. And yet we are all called to be one. Do you know that we cannot be one without being unique? How do you do that? You don't. He does it. Everyone came out of Adam. And the song says, I think it's from Handel's Messiah, for as in Adam all died, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. Oneness requires individuality, infinite possibilities of what he can do. What does God want for you? What has he planned for your life? Before the world was created, what did he see on the horizon that you could be or could do? How did he want to use you when he looked to August of 2019? Where did he want you to dwell when he looked at August of 2019? When your body was formed in the secret place, and he knew all your days, all your potentials, all the ways you would respond, all the ways you would listen, all of your likes, all of your dislikes, all the ways you would fail, all the dreams of your heart, all the longings of your soul, all the ways you could be, all the ways you would be. When he counted the number of hairs on your head, when he thought about all the glory you would bring to him, how marvelous and wonderful and great and past finding out and full of exceeding great joy were his thoughts to you. How long did he study you? How long did he meditate on your qualities? What delights did he instill in your personality? What color did he choose for your eyes and your hair? Were you going to need freckles? Did he know how you would love to read? Was he aware of what music would stir you? Did he know you would appreciate the outdoors? Did he decide whether you would prefer to travel or stay close to home? What did he allow in order to protect you from something else? What gifts did he place within you? How long did he prepare for you? What did he already know you would appreciate? What provisions did he set along the path of your life? Because he knew exactly when you would need them. All you have needed, his hand hath provided. What bridges did he put in place before you were born to keep you from danger? What is the value of your life? How much did he love you? It was no trouble to him at all. He was building his eternity around you, for you are precious to him. You are the crown of his creation. You are the pearl of great price. You are his chosen one. How long has he been waiting in anticipation for you to return his glory? How important and of what intrinsic value is one person in his plan for eternity? Let's see. Ruth 1:1. In the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So, and I'll interject, in the events brought together by God's providential arrangement of circumstances, a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and his 2 sons with him. What did it take to get to Ruth? To what lengths would God go? How would he weave his plan into the divine destiny of everybody involved in her story? Why would God's people wander through that territory? And so I began to look back this week, and I read from Numbers chapter 20 through 36 into the first 9 chapters of Deuteronomy. And I'm going to highlight that really quickly because that's 25 chapters if I did the math right. And Moses is speaking. I think what I said last time, I attributed the story to Joshua. It was actually Moses. Joshua comes in here in just a little bit. But he said, then came the children of Israel in the first year of the month, and the whole community of Israel arrived in the wilderness of Zin. And they're out of water. They began to blame Moses and say, if only we had died in the Lord's presence with our brothers. Why have you brought us into this wilderness to die? My goodness, God's people complaining. Why did you make us leave Egypt? And Moses and Aaron turned away from the people, went to the entrance of the tabernacle, where they fell face down on the ground. Then the glorious presence of the Lord appeared to them. And God told Moses and Aaron, he said, as the people watch, go and speak to this rock and let water pour out. But instead, Moses was exasperated with the people. He raised his hand, he struck the rock twice with his staff, and then the water gushed out. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me enough to demonstrate my holiness to the people of Israel, you will not lead them into the land I am giving them. And so after this, Moses comes to the Edomites. Edom and Moab share a border. They're in the same wilderness, very close. They're on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. They're together. And I touched on this story last time, where they wanted to go and go up the King's Highway. That's all they were going to do. But the king of Edom came out with his army and said, no, I'm not going to permit you to cross it. And because Edom refused to allow Israel to pass through their country, they were forced to turn around. And it's about this time that God begins to work with Moses and say, go up on a hill. I'm going to allow you to go up on a hill. You're going to look across, and I'll let you see the promised land where the children of Israel are going. But then you're going to be gathered to your fathers there, and another Joshua will lead them. Think about that assignment. Pick out a hill, Moses. Go up there and take a look. You're going to die when you get there. So before he does that, he begins to review and tell his last words. And it goes on for several chapters, but he's trying to make sure that this people will follow God and will obey what he wants. And so he's reviewing. I jump ahead to Deuteronomy 2. And he said, we wandered around the region of Mount Seir for a long time. Then at last the Lord said to me, you have been wandering around in this hill country long enough. Turn to the north. Then he warns them. The Edomites will feel threatened, so be careful. Do not bother them. That's why in this story they didn't wipe them all out. And he continued. By the way, just another little place here. He said, you've wandered for 40 years, but during these 40 years, the Lord your God has been with you, and you have lacked nothing. All you have needed, his hand hath provided. This thread of this message is through every hymn today by God's grace, and it's pretty wonderful. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. All you have needed, his hand provides. But then he continues, and this is down in verse 8 and 9. Then as we turn north along the desert route through Moab, the Lord warned us, do not bother the Moabites, the descendants of Lot, or start a war with them. I have given them Ar as their property, and I will not give you any of the land. And right there, he made provision for the birth of Ruth decades ahead of time. Her ancestors were already in line. Now, this wasn't true with the surrounding countries other than Edom and Moab. When they got to King Sihon of the Amorites, King Sihon said, no, you're not coming across our territory. He mobilized his army, and Israel killed every single person there. They got to King Og of Bashan. Same thing. Israel killed King Og, his sons, all his subjects. Not a single survivor remained. And Israel occupied this land. Then the people of Israel traveled. I'm back in Numbers 22 here. People of Israel traveled to the plains of Moab. And they already had instructions. They knew they couldn't attack them. But the king of Moab, what's his name here? Balak, son of Zippor, the Moabite king, he didn't know that. And so he hires a prophet named Balaam to come and curse the Israelites. Now, he's cursing the very people that God had just ordered to spare his life. And he's not only cursing them, he's determined to do it. Now, he hires this man, Balaam, who is evidently a gifted prophet. He has a gift, but it is a gift for hire. And he's identified in, it's in 2 Peter, he's mentioned in Jude, he's mentioned in Revelation when the letter's written to the church at... the name escapes me, one of the 7 churches. And he's identified as a false prophet whose wisdom and whose ability to see things or hear from God was available for purchase. And so God speaks to Balaam. He said, don't go with these people. You're not to curse them, for they have been blessed. And so he tells the people, go back home to your king. I cannot do this. They come to him again. They want him to go, and Balaam gets on his donkey, and he's headed there. And God puts an angel in front of him with a sword drawn, ready to strike him down. And the donkey sees it and runs off into the field. And Balaam beats the donkey. And he gets the donkey back on the road, and the angel goes and stands between 2 stone walls that border some grape vineyards. And the donkey sees him again, and he tries to go around the angel, and he gets over to the side of the wall, and he smashes Balaam's foot between the donkey and the wall, and Balaam beats the donkey again. And the angel moves back a little further, but where there isn't any room to go around him. And the donkey lays down and stops. And Balaam gets off and takes his staff to the donkey and begins to beat him again. And the Lord gave the donkey the ability to speak. What have I done to you that deserves your beating me 3 times? It asked Balaam. You have made me look like a fool, Balaam shouted. Excuse me, you're arguing with your donkey. I think the foolishness may not be on the donkey's part. But suddenly his eyes are open. He sees what's happened. The Lord said, why have you done this? If the donkey hadn't seen me, I would certainly have killed you by now and spared the donkey. Balaam confessed, I've sinned. I didn't realize you were there. So the king's not happy. He cannot get Balaam to curse the Israelites. He said, well, if you're not going to curse them, at least don't bless them. And Balaam responds, how can I curse those that God has not cursed? How can I condemn those that God has not condemned? And Balak demanded of Balaam, what have you done to me? I brought you to curse my enemies. Instead, you have blessed them. And Balaam says, no curse can touch Jacob. And by now, Numbers 24, Balaam realized the Lord was determined to bless Israel. And he said, this is the message. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob. How lovely are your homes, O Israel. And before Balaam departs, he said, I will tell you, king, one more thing. A star will rise from Jacob. A scepter will emerge from Israel. It will crush the heads of Moab's people, cracking the skulls of the people of Seir. Edom will be taken over, and Seir, its enemy, will be conquered, while Israel marches in triumph. And in 530 years, the armies of Moab and Mount Seir would come against Jerusalem. And as far as the eye could see, a vast army of giants would lie dead before the empty-handed army of Jehoshaphat. Generations would be blessed, and generations would pay a price. God's will would determine the path. We jumped into Deuteronomy, and these are the words that Moses spoke to all the people of Israel while they were in the wilderness. He said, you're headed for a wonderful land, but watch out. Be careful never to forget where you have been. Don't let these memories escape your mind. Pass them on to your children and grandchildren. Never forget the day when you stood before the Lord and at Mount Sinai, where he told me, summon the people before me, and I will personally instruct them. Chapter 5, oh, that they would always have hearts like this, that they might fear me and obey my commands. If they did, they and their descendants would prosper forever. Chapter 6, the Lord your God will soon bring you into the land he swore to give you. Chapter 7, the Lord did not set his heart on you and choose you because you were more numerous than the other nations, for you were the smallest of all the nations. Rather, it was simply that the Lord loves you. Chapter 8, remember how the Lord your God led you through the wilderness for these 40 years, humbling you and testing you to prove your character and to find out whether or not you would obey his commands. He did it to teach you that people do not live by bread alone. Rather, we live by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. For all these 40 years, your clothes didn't wear out, and your feet didn't blister or swell. Again, all you have needed along this way, his hand has provided. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land of flowing streams and pools of water, and nothing is lacking. When you have eaten your fill, be sure to praise the Lord, but that is the time to be careful. Listen, O Israel, chapter 9. Today, you are about to cross the Jordan River to take over the land belonging to nations much greater and more powerful than you. They live in cities with walls that reach to the sky. There will come a day when you are there in his purpose, standing before all He has planned for you, where your very next step will be into the promised land. We jump to Joshua 6. Meanwhile, Joshua said to the two spies, keep your promise. Go to the prostitute's house and bring her out, along with all her family. The men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, mother, brothers, and all the other relatives who were with her. They moved her whole family to a safe place near the camp of Israel. Then the Israelites burned the town and everything in it. Only the things made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron were kept for the treasury of the Lord's house. As a side note here, why did they do that? Why did they keep those things? What need does God have of those? Numbers 31. So Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted the gifts from the generals and captains and brought the gold to the tabernacle as a reminder to the Lord that the people of Israel belong to Him. That's what offerings are for. It reminds God that you belong to Him. So Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute and her relatives who were with her in the house because they had hidden the spies Joshua sent to Jericho. And she lives among the Israelites to this day. And she would marry an Israelite. And they would have a son who would need a wife in a few decades. Fast forward 30 years to the beginning of the time of the judges. And then a few more years to the time of a severe famine in God's eternal purpose. Again, Ruth 1:1, in the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land, so a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and his 2 sons with him. And when they reached Moab, they settled there. And because Moab and Edom were spared by God's commands, Ruth's grandparents would live to meet and fall in love. One day their children would see each other across the marketplace. They wouldn't be able to take their eyes off one another. And they would marry, and Ruth would be born out of their union. A few years later, God would allow a severe famine in Israel because His eye was on Ruth. And He had prepared a family that would pay a tremendous earthly price that they could not possibly have begun to understand to go find her. So in God's providential arrangement of circumstances, Naomi's family got to the right house on the right side of town and met this Ruth who would otherwise have never been born, in order to get her to the place for which she was made. Divine history required Ruth. There was no way around her. God's perfect will required Ruth. He requires you too. Matthew 1:18. This is how Jesus the Messiah was born. Back to verse 5. Salmon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz was the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David. Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Mary gave birth to Jesus, who is called the Messiah. And if he can direct your steps to get you to settle in the right land, that is how we get to Christmas in August. Great history lesson, Brother Barry. Nice review, wonderful story. What's the point? The point is he will do, has been doing, and he is still doing the same for you. You are part of the same eternal plan. That is why you are here. Long before you were born, he was there. Every road you would turn down was known before the road began. Everywhere God would need you was established. Really? How do you know that? Paul is in Greece. He's wandering around Athens. This is the place where, this is Culture City. This is the place. This is the place where everybody goes to discuss new ideas and new concepts and study mathematics and study philosophy and anything to be studied. This is where you go. And Paul is going to talk to this people. In fact, he's invited into a special symposium, if you will, to have a conversation. And Paul is going to use in a couple of verses here 5 verses that aren't used anywhere else, or 5 words that aren't used anywhere else in the Bible. And they're all together right here in a couple of verses we'll get to in a minute. And he's using these verses because he's a very well-educated man, and he is talking to the elite of the elite thinkers, and they are going to know exactly what he is talking about when he speaks these words. The English language isn't the same as Greek. We have to have a whole bunch of other words to get to the meaning, but Paul knew what he was doing here. Acts 17:22. So Paul, standing before the council, addressed them as follows. Men of Athens, I know that you are very religious in every way. For as I was walking along, I saw your many shrines, and on one of your altars, it had this inscription on it: to an unknown God. Some people think that might have been carved by Socrates, but it's an empty pedestal. To an unknown God. This God, whom you worship without knowing, is the one I'm telling you about. He is the God who made the world and everything in it. Since he is Lord of heaven and earth, he doesn't live in man-made temples. And humans can't serve his needs, for he has no needs. He himself gives life and breath to everything, and he satisfies every need. From one man, he created all the nations throughout the whole earth. And here's these next 2 verses. He decided beforehand when they should rise and fall, and he determined their boundaries. Now we miss it in English. Here's what he's saying. God determined the exact times and homes in which men should live. God horizoned. That is, he saw all the scenes of life before creation. This guarantees that God works each event in conjunction with his eternal purpose, operating in his perfect wisdom and absolute foreknowledge. He commanded and arranged the appointed, fixed, and opportune time, and set the boundary lines of their residence. His purpose was that so the nations would seek after him and perhaps grope or touch or personally investigate the path toward him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. You mean to tell me that God has an exact place everyone should live? Yes. That's how Naomi found Ruth. I remember years ago at Scott Depot, this would have been mid to late 70s. There was a wonderful man in our congregation. I believe he was on the board. I think he may have been chairman at that time. I think about the time that we came there, although this was a couple of years later. And he was an executive person, high up, I believe, in a electronics company. And I can tell you his name, but it's all right. He's a wonderful person. And he was offered a promotion, I think, with another company, a very prestigious company, and it would require that he move to Kansas City, and that's what he was supposed to do. He was to take that job, and he did. However, as they began to pray about where to live, God directed, they were looking on one side of town, and God directed for the other. Because though he was going to where God wanted him to be, on one side of town, there would eventually be a traffic accident that would claim his life. On the other side of town was where he was to live. God knows, before the creation of the world, the property lines of your dwelling. How much more does he need to know for you to rest in him? Every major life choice, Brother Helm writes, such as a companion or a vocation which is not made by the Spirit, will continue to produce consequences the remainder of that person's life. Often these choices are made between the ages of 12 and 20. Even if one is converted after these major decisions have been made, though Jesus will freely forgive all past sin and error, one will still grapple with the results and suffer within the confines of these choices God was not permitted to make. There's no way to adequately convey the seriousness of waiting on God's specific guidance concerning our vocation, our companion, our place of dwelling, and a choice of a school or college. God knows exactly who we are, what we will be in 10 or 20 years, and precisely where he wants to use us in his kingdom. If you have messed up, God is not caught unawares. He saw it on the horizon. He has made provision for you to start over this very moment before you ever leave your seat this morning. His faithfulness is that great. His view of the horizon is that clear. He has been working out the details for centuries. Isaiah 60:22, the smallest family will become 1,000 people, and the tiniest group will become a mighty nation. At the right time, I, the Lord, will make it happen. He has the plan. He has always had the plan. Why do we think we sometimes have a better one? Instead of wasting our lives trying to work out our own plan, why not rest and watch his open up? The secret of God being able to work through his people in power is simply this: cease to work it out ourselves and let him work through us. Did you take the shortest path to where you are? They could have been there in 11 days. Do you think God is surprised or was caught off guard? Or do you think he knew before time began? You may be called to one person or to 1,000. That's up to him. Just do what he says. Whatever he has promised you, whatever you have dreamed for, whatever you have trusted for, whatever he has placed within you, whatever he has told you, don't give up on any of it. Don't try to work it out yourself. Keep trusting for it. He will get you there. He has the best for you. Don't settle for less than the best. The fastest way to get there is by waiting. Just do what he says. He will get you there. He knows how to do it. It was his plan from the beginning. Don't ever give up. Hallelujah.